Do you know what's wrong with mirrors and bars? Men always make hard eyes at themselves. Do you know that there's a people in the jungle that believe a mirror steals your spirit away? Maybe it'd do me some good. My mother always said I had too much spirit.
You know, it's been a while since I've enjoyed an Edmond O'Brien film, so I decided to check out Shield for Murder from 1954. This was an excellent bad cop story featuring O'Brien as a police detective who has, well, made some wrong decisions, and we watch him as he falls into corruption. The film also featured John Agar and Marla English and a number of other good actors, and I'll give an overview of the film and then some closing thoughts. All spoiler-free, of course. Well, the film opens up and we see Edmond O'Brien as the police lieutenant Barney Nolan. It's late at night and he's in a back alley somewhere, and it looks like he's about to arrest a sketchy-looking bookkeeper. But instead, there's nobody around. He draws his gun and shoots him. And he also fires some shots in the air, to make it look like it was legit, But it's right here, at the start of the film, that he has done this bad deed. And he takes $25,000 from the body. Now, he thinks no one has seen any of this crime. But little does he know that there was a deaf-mute guy who saw the whole thing from his window. Well, back at the police station, the police chief, Captain Gunnarsson, Gunnarsson, what a great name for a police chief. He's played here by Emil Meyer. Well, he's concerned, as apparently Lieutenant Nolan has a record of having killed before. So he talks to him about it and doesn't seem very happy. But we see his partner and his protege, the Sergeant Mark Brewster, played by actor John Agar, who stands up for him. He believes in him and defends him for now. So he's off the hook for now. So Nolan leaves to go see his girl, the character Patty, who's played by lovely actress Marla English. And he finds her at this club where she's started to take work as a cigarette girl, and she is immodestly attired. So he snaps and yells at the manager there. Maybe a little window here into his fiery temper that we'll see more of in this film. So later, two private detectives show up and they want to speak with Nolan. It's characters Fat Michaels and Laddie O'Neill. I love the names in this film. Fat Michaels is played by none other than Claude Akins, Sheriff Lobo from the old BJ and the Bear show from the late 70s. Boy, there's one I should go and look up again. I wonder if that's streaming. Well, Laddie O'Neill is played by Larry Ryle. Well, it turns out they work for this gangster, Packy Reed, actor Hugh Sanders. And they know that this bookkeeper that was killed had 25 grand on him, and they want it back. Now, both of these thugs seem very suspicious that the lieutenant has the money. Well, we cut over to Nolan, and he's with his girl Patty, and they go to look at some model homes. These are some really nice ones. They're all furnished and decorated. Now, his plan, it would seem, is to use his illegal money to buy a place for him and his lovely lady. She seems thrilled by this idea, but can he really get away with this? Well, he brings Patty home, and those thugs are there again. Now, they want him to go and meet with the boss, Packy, so he agrees. Now, the thugs also try to question Patty, but Brewster shows up, tells him to get lost. Now, he talks to Patty privately, asking questions about the money that hasn't turned up. Now, he still believes in Nolan at this point, but he wants to get the bottom of this. What happened to the money? And he confides that maybe Nolan has changed a little as he's gotten older. He doesn't know, but Patty just believes in him and just thinks he's lonely and just wants to be loved. So at this point, nobody really suspects Nolan of this theft. So Nolan goes to meet with the gangster, Packy Reed, and he just wants his money. But Nolan pleads ignorance. They're watching a boxing match together, and you can see kind of the tension of the match is reflected in the room. Reed's getting annoyed. He suspects Nolan, but he can't really do anything. So back at the station, the lieutenant interviews this young hoodlum who was arrested for a petty theft. And it's an interesting scene because even though we, the viewer, know that this Nolan has kind of gone bad, we get to see a merciful side of his character. He gives the kid a pep talk, gives him some of his own money, and lets him go. So maybe he's not all bad. But now a little bit later, Lieutenant Nolan meets with the DA, played by actor William Schallert. But before they get very far in their discussion, the deaf-mute character from earlier in the film, is played by actor David Hillary Hughes. He shows up. Now, he can't talk or communicate, so he has a note that he gives to the lieutenant saying that he saw everything. So we see the expression on Nolan's face that, he could be in trouble here. But at this point, he's the only one that knows who this witness is. So he communicates back to this man that he'll come and visit with him later. Now Brewster goes to meet with Patty, and seems like maybe there's some growing suspicion of his partner and his friend Nolan. He asks some questions of Patty, but she really doesn't give much. She seems kind of annoyed by him and doesn't really help. So later, at the apartment of the deaf-mute character, he's apparently written out all of the events of what had happened and left it on his desk. So Lieutenant Nolan arrives, spots the window to the alley, kind of puts two and two together and figures out that, this guy could have very easily have witnessed the crime that he committed. So Nolan gets angry, tries to bribe this guy, and in a rage, pushes him backwards and accidentally kills him. He strikes his head. So realizing he's really in a jam here, he dusts away all of his own prints, and then to cover his actions, pushes this man's body down the stairs and then leaves the scene. So Lieutenant Nolan, he's starting to maybe despair a little bit. He heads to a bar and he's drinking really heavily when this lovely girl comes over to flirt with him. And hey, it's Carolyn Jones, a young Morticia Adams with blonde hair. So she's a barfly who seems to show some interest in this kind of sullen cop and gets really chatty with him. So they get a booth together. It's sort of an Italian restaurant bar, I guess. Now, the detectives, meanwhile, have found the body of the deaf-mute man, and they investigate. Initially, they think it's just an accidental death that has happened, that he fell and he wasn't able to call for help. But then Brewster discovers the notebook, describing the details of what he saw in the alleyway. And apparently Nolan had missed this earlier. And finally, it's starting to come together for Brewster. So back at this bar, Nolan and this girl have some drinks, and she flirts pretty strong with him. She's also pretty tanked at this point, but he resists her Morticia charms and leaves to call Patty to check on her. And she mentions that the two thugs had come by, and he's really annoyed at this news. And they have some unappealing spaghetti there at the table when the thugs show up there. Now, Lieutenant Nolan loses it. He goes bonkers, clobbering poor Claude Akins with his gun. I mean, I watched the scene. I counted over 20 times he struck him on the head. Man, he must really hate those Amco commercials. AA, honk honk, MCO. Oh, come on, I can't be the only one that remembers those. So Nolan heads home, and Brewster is there waiting. He's put it all together, and he knows that his friend Nolan is guilty, and he's got his gun drawn on him. All of the facts have come together, and he realizes, that his partner has committed this crime. And Nolan seems kind of momentarily guilty, like he'll get up and go, but he quickly knocks the gun away and draws his own and aims it at his partner. Looks like he's about to shoot him, but then he just clubs him instead and leaves the scene. Heads over to Patty's place, wakes her up, tells her, get dressed. We got to get out of town. He makes it sound like he's been framed and they need to leave. Now she's changing, and Nolan goes on about how everyone is after him. He's looking really sweaty and haggard at this point. But she has kind of started to put it together as well, figured out that he took the money, and he loses it and just lashes out at her.
Money. Did it Belong to Packy Reed? Mark's it.
Mark? What's he got to do with this?
Barney,
Why was he hanging around here last night? What did he tell you about me?
he's trying to help
Help me? 10 minutes ago he tried to take me in. What's been going on between you two?
Barney, wait.
He's turned you against me, hasn't he? Tell me, what did he say? Tell me! Tell me!
Well, Brewster goes to the chief and gives him the bad news. He's really broken up about it, and the chief still seems a little bit defensive of Nolan until he sees the letter from the deaf man, and it's all come together for the chief now. Nolan is identified as the criminal that they want. So the chief tells the men that Nolan has gone sour, and he sends them all out. So everybody is on the lookout. So Nolan slips back into an old police patrolman uniform. And hey, it kind of looks like he's back in his outfit from the movie Between Midnight and Dawn. But okay, realizing it's going to be hard to get out of town, he arranges with a criminal named Manning, actor Richard Cutting, to be smuggled out of the country, maybe try to get to Argentina. And with them is the professor, Richard Deacon. And hey, it's Mel Cooley of the Dick Van Dyke Show. Wow. So it's going to cost a lot of money, but they can get him out of the country. So the police are moving in on him, and I don't want to say much more here because I don't want to give away the ending. It's pretty cool. And there's a great chase scene around this big swimming pool as well, with a shootout. So Detective Nolan, he's on the run. The police are moving in, but can he make his escape and get away? Well, you have to watch for yourself to see how this film ends. So let me offer some closing thoughts here. The Shield for Murder was released in 1954. It was directed by Howard Koch and the star of the film, Edmond O'Brien. And maybe because it was his first time, that's part of how he missed this scene with the boom mic shadow. In any case, the film was produced by Aubrey Schenck. I'm not sure if this one is in the public domain or not, but boy, there are plenty of copies on YouTube, which makes me wonder. Since it doesn't show that it was produced by a major studio, maybe it's public domain, but I couldn't tell from anything I read. In any case, the film is based on a novel by the same name by William P. McGivern. So here are my general thoughts on the film. I thought this was an enjoyable crime story in the hashtag bad cop category. And this might actually be the very first cop gone bad film that I've watched and reviewed on this channel. And it's interesting to watch this type of a story. You know, O'Brien isn't just playing an evil cop, but he's a guy who is burned out. He laments in the film that he's been on the force for 16 years. He's not making much money, and he started to hate people. And I think it helps that at this point, Edmond O'Brien looks maybe a little bigger, a little doughier, kind of sweaty looking in the film. And I think that feeds well into his character here. So he takes this money from a crook. Now, ultimately, his intentions were good. He just wanted the money for himself to buy a house for he and his girl. I mean, hey, it was money from a sketchy bookkeeper. So he figures, why not get a shot at the American dream? But we know from the very beginning of the film, this being cinema from the early 1950s, in the Hays Code era, it's not going to work out for him. We know that by the end of the film, he's going to get his comeuppance. It was interesting to me watching this. I saw shades of another Edmond O'Brien film, DOA, which is a great movie, by the way. And it's a case where it's very similar in that the film starts out, and in that case, his character has been poisoned. So we know that from the very beginning, his fate is sealed. So kind of a similar thing here with Shield for Murder. Film starts off, boom, he kills a guy. We know his fate is sealed. So it's basically an hour and a half of watching his gradual fall. And one of the things that stood out to me while I was watching this film is that personally, I never really sympathized with his character. I love Edmond O'Brien films. I think he's one of my favorite actors. I've seen many of them on this channel. Plays the everyman character so great. And in other films I've watched, even when he may be a bad guy, he's still kind of likable. And you want him to make it because I don't know, you can just kind of relate to his character. But here in this film, he just looks spent, bloated, sweaty, and he's really sort of a jerk to people, namely to poor Claude Akins. I think this may be the first time for me when I just wanted to see his character brought down. I don't know, what do you think? If you've seen this film, did you sympathize at all with his character? Now, I did feel a little sorry for his sweetie, played by the lovely Marla English. She just happened to hook up with the wrong guy, and when she starts putting things together, there's a sympathy you feel for her. What was maybe a little distracting for me was that she looks very young. I think she was 19 in this film, with O'Brien being almost 40, so that didn't really help things. It's funny, I actually caught Marla English recently, unintentionally, in another film I was watching. It was a Mystery Science Theater episode called The She Creature from 1956. Now, in that film, she was with a much worse character, an evil hypnotist who was controlling her and also summoning evil sea monster spirits. So, yeah, that was a weird one. In any case, I was reading her bio, and she would leave Hollywood at age 21 to go and start a family. So she did not act for very long. Now, I didn't really think there was a lot of chemistry with her character and Edmond O'Brien's character, but what stood out to me was his relationship with Carolyn Jones, namely in the bar scenes. Yes, these scenes together are very brief, but she seemed much more genuinely interested in this cop, and I liked her curious, prying questions as she tried to get to understand him and know him better. And it's interesting to see Carolyn Jones, Morticia, with the blonde hair. It's just such a different look. But I really like those scenes together. And then, of course, when Nolan loses it and starts beating up on the thug, that's the end of her interest in this cop completely. Also, John Agar was excellent as the loyal protégé who sees his mentor and hero start to fall. Believes in him until he can't believe in him anymore. In a similar way, Emil Meyer was also really good as the captain. Noteworthy was his scene when he too realizes that this Nolan character has gone bad. And he wanted to believe in him, but finally all of the evidence is against him. And he breaks the word to his men. It's a really good scene.
They call us servants of the people. Well, our bosses are entitled to know we've had a maniac wearing a city shield. When this story breaks, all of you are going to be the goats. Every police officer in the country will get dirty looks and dirty words. And the funny stories about policemen aren't going to be so funny. We gave Nolan the same edge we give each other. We believed him. If he gets away, he'll laugh at us. If we nail him, they'll hate us. Go out and rub your faces in the mud. Hunt him down before he kills again.
So there's that sense of futility. You know, if he gets away, they look bad. If they bring him down, they look bad. But they got a job to do, and that's what they're going to do. By the way, I love the poster for this film. Dame Hungry Killer Cop runs berserk. I guess. Dame Hungry. More like spaghetti and cigarette hungry cop wants to call it quits and run off to Argentina. But whatever. I love movie posters from this era. Often they're just like completely inaccurate. Now, before I close, I just wanted to make a silly, unrelated side note. I was talking with my dad recently about another Edmond O'Brien film I have not seen yet, but that I want to check out, and he's already seen it. It's called The Barefoot Contessa, with Humphrey Bogart and Ava Gardner and Edmond O'Brien. Knowing absolutely nothing about the film, I speculated that Barefoot Contessa, it's probably a heartwarming and quirky comedy about an Italian countess looking for romance, and she's lost her shoes or something. To which my dad told me that I was very wrong in my estimation. Well, I guess I'll have to watch this one for myself in a future review, but that's on my list. Anyhow, let me wrap this one up. Shield for Murder came out in 1954. I thought it was a satisfying crime film about a lawman's fall from grace and the people that are impacted by this. And it's a great story as O'Brien's character makes his fall. As mentioned, he's not necessarily very likable in the film, so we just watch with curiosity to to see what happens as one by one his friends and his sweetheart put all the facts together. And it's really a good film. I enjoyed this one a lot, and it's worth checking out.